Good morning. Craig told me last night, who's the general manager here, said that you all look tired.
Last night?
No, you look tired when you were gathering for dinner. Which I'm not surprised, but normally, unless it's a real cunt group, normally you don't get tired to the third or fourth or fifth day. And the last night, when I'm pounding, this is the last 2 minutes of the Super Bowl, you cunts, and I go through my ranting and fucking raving, screaming with tears running down my cheeks, that's when you look tired. But he says that you look tired yesterday, which is interesting. Now, by the fourth or fifth day, you'll look tired in the morning, like right now. Right now, you look kind of wide awake. By the fourth or fifth day, it's interesting because you're draining emotionally on a sub-rosa level. Everybody know what no, anyway. On a subconscious level, we'll use a word that you understand. And on a subconscious level, you're draining. You're draining. And which I always find amusing. I don't know why I find it amusing. It means the world's going to shit, really. It's, you know, it's the millennials, geometrically, the world's going to cock. But we've gone from the Spartan 300 to you.
Well, Dan, if I may, you know what
Yes, sir.
You know what I think the difference is?
What? Between the Spartan 300 and you? Okay, be my guest.
I think that if we were raised in that kind of culture from day one, and if everyone that we knew was part of that community,
Absolutely.
there's a certain level of strength that you get from that and support.
Yeah, absolutely.
And right here, we're in a comfort zone. When we leave here and go back, that's when we're on our own fighting the world.
Correct. Whether you're going to be a warrior or a warrior. Okay? And I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt that you're going to be warriors. But you don't have to be alpha males to get this shit done. You just don't. There's only a couple, two for sure, arguably three alpha males on that list of Hall of Famers. The rest are, shall we say, politicians, consensus management, and all the things I don't believe in. You know? I had a guy in the military. I used to work for a guy named General Roy Atterbury. He was a one-star general who retired as a two-star general. But his claim to fame, he's got the Medal of Honor. And as a general officer, you can make your own uniforms, like Custard and you know those things you see in the movies, General Custard at the Little Bighorn. So he never buttoned his blouse. In other words, his coat, his what do you call it? 'Cause, and one of the reasons he did is because he smoked cigars and he dropped ashes and he didn't want to burn his blouse. So he was forever burning his fucking ties and shirts, but not his blouse. And he was from Texas, and he got, he didn't lose his leg, but I mean, they shot the shit out of him in the Korean War, and so he kind of drug his leg, and he kind of wore out the inside of his shoe, because he drug it like this. And he used to say, "Peña, you were the sorriest motherfucker in this man's army. How in the fuck did you get to be an officer?" And I said, "Sir, General Atterbury, I'm an officer and a gentleman." He said, "Well, we know you ain't no fucking gentleman, Peña." And so I'd go in the officers club, and we'd be having drinks, and General Woodrow Vaughn, who was a three-star general, and General Roy Atterbury would be, they used to like to stand at the bar because they wanted to be with the junior officers. So I'm at the bar, trying to mind my own business, being inconspicuous. And they say, "Hey, Peña, get your sorry fucking ass down here." So I slide down next to him and he says, "You're going to buy us a drink." Now, I'm making, a young second lieutenant at that time was making about $302 a month, which was big money, $302. Up from $101 a month up from $48 a month as a private, okay? And so, but the drinks were like 25 cents, 15 cents, no big deal. But when you're buying drinks for the entire motherfucking officers club, I mean, you can go through $302 pretty quick. And especially when all the officers know that Peña, a fucking scrub for a second lieutenant brand new, is behind them, then they're drinking doubles, triples, you know. They're leaving drinks on the bar. Okay. And so they used to pound on me. And but all those guys were warriors. As you're talking about, they all had the same mentality, especially back in the 60s. In the 60s, they didn't, and even though I didn't go through SEAL training, they didn't send you home on the weekends for SEAL training, But you're right. You're absolutely correct. And that's why I say you are who, you show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And you are who you hang around with. And just like Jim Rohn said years ago, and I've said for a long time, you're the average of the 5 people. Now, if your dad and your mom were Olympians, or your dad and your mom, your dad was a 4-star general, okay, like yours, or your dad was a hard-ass cop like mine was, who was in the CIA, and if you Google my father, Manuel Peña, you will see that he is allegedly been connected to 18 to 22 assassinations for the CIA. He is linked supposedly to the assassination of Martin Luther King, John Kennedy, Bob Kennedy, and Che Guevara. And my father was brought out of retirement to head up the investigation for the U.S. government for the assassination of Robert Kennedy. And they say what they did is they brought a hitman to come and cover up. That was the theory, okay. And they were always forever wanting to interview him and do a documentary, and they used to interview him, and especially when he got real old, he used to just sit there and listen, like in The Godfather, listen. And they said, well, Manny, do you mind if we call you Manny? He says, oh, sure, you can call me anything you want. And anything you want. But that's where I was raised. So you're absolutely right. And so that's my reality. That's my comfort zone. I talk about we talk about commitment actually later today, but I'm going to do it now while I'm thinking about it. The difference when I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. Klaus Kleinfeld, who's up there on the Hall of Fame, a number of years ago, I was supposed to meet him at the Frankfurt airport. And I was introducing him to some luminaries, one of which I believe was the managing partner for PricewaterhouseCoopers for Germany. I was involved in a very serious accident in Cabo San Lucas, racing dune buggies with my 2 sons. So when I showed up at the airport, Vinica, who some of you have talked to, right? Vinica, yeah. Okay. Bless you. Pushes me in a wheelchair into this restaurant that they're wearing white gloves, tails, just like you eat at home every day, right? White gloves and tails. And I'm slumped over like this, and I have one of these metallic blankets, that the Red Cross put on you when you're almost dead. And so they push me, and I'm like this, and Klaus is about where Matt is, and I look up, and he says, God almighty, Dan, what's wrong? What happened to you? Why are you here? She pushes me a little farther, and I said, Winnica, could you straighten my head out, please? So she takes me by the ear like this, and kind of, you have to know Winnica. Winnica's a tough bitch. She kind of pulls my head up like this, and I'm talking, because I didn't want to talk to him like this, and I said, I told you I'd be here. Now, what had happened to me is I was racing dune buggies, and going about 50, 60 miles an hour, I hit a boulder or a rock under the sand, and the dune buggy went up in the air and flipped and landed back down on me, and it cracked my sternum, collapsed all my lungs, punctured my liver, punctured my spleen, punctured part of one of the main things that go to your heart, broke 8 ribs, did all kind of shit to me, almost died. And all the stories you hear about medicine in third world countries is true. shattered my collarbone. My collarbone had fragments sticking out like this, and so I told my oldest son, whatever happens, don't let me go unconscious. So every time I started to go unconscious, he slapped me. And so my younger son said, are you fucking crazy? Dad's going to fucking kill you. And every time I start to go unconscious, he'd slap me. So they get me into the hospital. Now I got bones sticking out my fucking shoulder. And the Mexican doctors look at me like this we think you have a fractured clavicle. we think. You know, and I wasn't in the mood for any. And so then I had $700 in my wallet. That's exactly what my bill was, $700 cash. Like a coincidence. Like a coincidence. It took me a couple of days. I finally got a plane out. But I was there to meet Klaus. Klaus says he still remembers that when he thinks he's got a cold or he's not going to go to a meeting, he has a flashback from that. Now, why was I like that? Well, the reason I was like that is because when I was 6 years old, I landed in Le Havre, France. My dad was a head of the CID, Criminal Investigation Division of the United States Army Europe during the Korean War. My mother and I sailed across the Atlantic to meet him, and he said, I'll pick you up, son. A long distance phone calls in those days he couldn't hear, and it was all scratchy. I'll be there, son. Okay. So he's at Le Havre. He picks me up, picks us up. So I go to put my arms around him to give him a hug. I bring my hands back, like in a horror movie, massive, just blood all over. So I said, Daddy, what happened? What happened? He said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And he takes me like this, let's walk to the limo, or where his driver was. He had just had surgery. They took a tumor out of his back. And he wouldn't let them put them under a general anesthetic, only a local. And he had a .45 automatic on his chest with mirrors to watch the surgeon because he had a lot of top secret information. He was the head of the CID, etc. Just stitched me up. I got to go pick up my son. So when you've seen that, when you're 6, you're not going to let all that shit that happened to me not fulfill a commitment. Now you might have a migraine, or you've got diarrhea, and you'll miss a meeting. That's the difference. When I tell you, of course, the corollary to that is when I say I'm going to fuck you up, I mean I'm going to fuck you up. That's just not a fucking metaphor. And when I say I'm accused of, I wouldn't say this on YouTube, I'm going to kill your children, your grandchildren, your goldfish, and everybody in your extended family, people believe me. Of course, that's all myth. That's all myth. But commitment, these guys understood. These guys can't spell it. Because they're lazy, the millennials are lazy cunts. And like I said, he'd have to convince me to put money in his deal that the millennials need to survive this planet, which I don't believe they do. Now, I may be convinced different, and I'm going to take a lot of flack for this, but I don't give a shit. It's the truth. Now, speaking of flack, Brian Quantum Leap Rose was on TED's program. I don't know what that means. TED Talk. I don't know what that is. He gave, apparently, the seminar, me, the castle, etc., a shout-out again, which I still don't know what that means. But I haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure he did well because he practiced. Now he practices for a different reason. He practices because he's an MIT engineer, and a lot of what he does is associated with his self-esteem, and so he likes to do things perfectly. That's why his YouTube things are so orchestrated so well. Okay. Thank you very much, YouTubers. We'll talk to you later tonight.